Tell me a little bit about being the airborne traffic reporter. Were you in a plane or a helicopter?
My first day in the helicopter, I will never forget it. They needed somebody to fly, and I had applied for this job, and it was just like kind of part-time fill-in, and it was a snowstorm. And I was expecting at the time, I'll never forget it, because I was expecting a helicopter that was the equivalent of, the show Airwolf, Right. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do it, and I really, they were like, well, have you been in, oh yeah, I've been in a helicopter. No, I haven't been in a helicopter. Yeah, then I got there and it looked like the MASH helicopter.
Benztown President Dave Chachi Dennis loves radio and all of his radio friends.
Hey, Chachi. Hey, everybody.
Because Chachi loves everybody.
I'd like to welcome Heidi Raphael. And before you say hi, Heidi, let me intro you properly. Heidi is Beasley's Media Group Chief Communications Officer. She's in charge of overseeing all aspects of communications, branding, and marketing on behalf of Beasley. She's been recognized by Radio Inc. as one of the most influential women in radio for the last 15 years in a row. And she also serves as the co-chair for the board of directors of the Library of American Broadcasting. She's a member of the Florida Association of Broadcasters Board of Directors, as well as a member of the Southwest Florida Advisory Board of Home Base, which is an organization dedicated to helping veterans and their families. Please welcome Heidi Raphael to the podcast. Hi, Heidi.
Hey, Chachi. Thank you so much. This is so wonderful. I'm so grateful.
Oh, it's so good to have you. And Heidi, we've known each other, I guess now probably for at least the last 5 or 6 years. And you guys have...
Oh, yeah. It seems like forever. In a good way.
I've seen you forever. We were just lamenting how it's been almost a year now. I think CRS was the last time we were in person last February.
I think you're right. Yeah, definitely. In service to America, actually, too.
Right, in service to America. This last year has been a slog, but just really am a huge fan of you, a huge fan of Beasley, the fantastic things you do, not only in broadcasting, but just for, I think, global good. And we'll go into that in a couple minutes. But I think you're a fantastic company. You work for a fantastic company, and I'm very impressed with all the good things that you do for the community. Are you in Naples right now, Florida?
I am. I'm in Naples today.
Now, growing up in Buffalo, did you ever think that you would be in the sunny coast of Naples, Florida?
No. And I never did, actually. It's so funny when it's like 60 or 65 here, people are like, oh, it's cold. And I'm like, what are you kidding?
Yeah. Do you still have family in Buffalo?
My whole family's in Buffalo. I love Buffalo and I love the people. And, it's not where I'm from, it's who I am, as they say there. So it's a wonderful place.
Sorry about your Bills losing to the Kansas City Chiefs, but you guys had a phenomenal season and hopefully more to come.
Yep. Watching the games, quite frankly, throughout the season, Josh Allen and everyone, just a wonderful team. They're humble and they're hungry and it's all about gratitude.
Because I think it had been since the 90s, since they were in the playoffs last. So it's great to see them.
It was. I worked for Rich Communications at the time, and we actually carried the games on 97 Rock and on GR55. We carried the 4 Super Bowls. So I had the privilege of being able to go to 2 of the Super Bowls.
Oh, my gosh. How cool is that?
Yeah, it really was. And that team as well was just unbelievable. And it's really, the heart and the soul of the city. It's just... And I'm telling you, Sundays, it's church and football.
Well, I'm sure this season put an adrenaline shot in everyone's arm, and it was good to have that. Tell me a little bit about growing up in Buffalo.
I loved growing up in Buffalo. I have 4 younger brothers. We're best friends. We're siblings, but we're close too. And it was just wonderful. I'm the oldest and the only girl in the family. And it's those poor boys.
Any of your family members in broadcasting?
Not at all. They're all in healthcare, or 2 of them work at Verizon, and my other brothers are in healthcare.
Did your parents, did they embrace you going down the path of radio?
They did. Looking back, really my parents and my grandparents, I can remember my grandma saying, you can do anything you want to do. And my father and my mother, they always, I don't know if they really understood exactly what I did, but, they'd hear me on the radio and their friends would hear me I was on a Music of Your Life station there, which was great. It was a great experience. And my parents' friends used to listen. So that was cool.
Oh, I bet. That is really cool. I remember when I was on the air in San Diego and my parents got such a kick out of me being on the air and they'd want me to send them air checks. So that's great. They got to hear you. So I love this part about your story, but you actually got interested in radio in middle school after seeing All the President's Men with Dustin Hoffman and Rob Redford.
Oh my gosh. I was so hooked. It was just, and I remember Jessica Savage and Barbara Walters, and I saw them both and I thought, I want to be them when I grow up. And, at the time, I had a deep voice for a girl and I was very paranoid about it. And I think it was one of my teachers that said and they said, you should do the announcements. So I went downstairs and the principal let me, and every day I would do the pledge to the flag and I would do the daily announcements. And
oh, no kidding.
So if you screwed up, everybody heard it.
So that was really your first foray into broadcasting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's how I started. And then in high school, they had a radio station and it was great. And, I would I'd actually sell candy and all kinds of stuff so we could buy 45s. I'm really dating myself, but, buy little river band records. And it was really, it was really, really cool. And then I would enter these, distributive education. It's called DECA. It's a wonderful program across the country. Actually, it's international. And at the time they had a radio advertising competition where they give you a client, and then you'd have to write a spot, and then you'd have to record the spot. So while my brothers were out playing street hockey, I would be in my room with a catalog, just picking random items and recording commercials to practice because you don't have time to do it in the competition, and they're using them. And then so I did that, and I went my junior and senior year. I did that, and somehow I won. And it was through that I met some really cool people, same age, and some of them were older than me. And they said, we're going to Medaille College in Buffalo, which was this wonderful 4-year school, and had a great communications program. And I went there and started interning right out of, actually in my second year. The gentleman that was running WBEN, which is this unbelievably amazing station there. It's a news talk station, and it's just a great station. And the gentleman that was there at the time, he was a legend, Jim McLaughlin. He was running it, and the news director, and this guy, Dick Reifenberg, who was at our school, called him and said, I have this person that's looking for an internship. And through that, I was able to get an internship as a street reporting intern.
Have you actually out on the street reporting news stories?
Well, I didn't report on them, but I worked with someone, Brian Meyer, who was absolutely phenomenal. He works for the Buffalo News today. I was so privileged to work with him, and I would follow him around and, clip news articles, and I'd go to the courts and I'd help him, I'd do anything. I was the intern. So whatever he needed, I would run over and do. And it was just phenomenal, but you cover the courts. And it was through that I ended up with a paid internship at WIVB, which is the CBS affiliate. They're another wonderful operation. It was right in the same building and down the hall. And I ended up I outlived my internship time and just stayed until they said you can't stay anymore.
So at that point, you've done radio, television. When everyone was in home class, you were doing the announcements. So you've done live announcing, you've done radio, and you've done television. Did you at this point like one more than the other?
I was grateful for the time that I learned as far as working as an intern in TV and writing, learning how to write for the news and, the nightly news, I should say.
Right.
But I really love radio. I just do. I love radio. And I can remember hanging out at home and I would be listening to 97 Rock and listening to Wild Bill Weston and Paul Hyne and all these incredible people who I would later come to know and work for. I worked for, Bill Weston gave me my first full-time radio job in Buffalo. I was actually doing traffic at the time in a helicopter, and I had met Bill somewhere in Buffalo, and Bill actually called me because there was an opening there, an opportunity came up to work with Danny Neaverth, who is an absolute legend.
Yeah, we're gonna get there though. Hold on. Yes, you've done so many cool things, and the fact that you got to work with Danny was phenomenal. I want to hear about that. So you've made up your mind, though, it sounds like pretty early that you want to pursue radio. Once you won that award when you entered through Decca, it was like you were just, here I go. By the way, my first gig was at KFMB in San Diego, which also had an AM and FM and a television station. And so the TV station was just down the hall where one of my best friends worked, and he became a television reporter. But just like you, there's a mystique about radio, and I just found the radio side so much more exciting. And no disrespect to the TV side, but it just seemed to be so structured and kind of sterile in a lot of ways. And so it just wasn't as exciting for me.
There's magic that you just... and you learn to think quick on your feet when you're live on the air. And, radio is just, things change by the minute. So
yeah,
it was just like, boom, boom, boom. Okay. All right.
So how do you pivot? Because you went and you actually worked in aerospace for a little bit. Tell me a bit about that experience.
So my senior year of college, after working, interning, it was a paid internship. After I finished at Channel 4, an opportunity came up to work at Moog, which is this wonderful international aerospace firm. They were making the shuttle actuators for the space shuttle, and all kinds of incredible technology. They do stuff for the government, and they had an opportunity in their video department. And I worked with a gentleman who was just wonderful. I learned a lot from him, and we actually worked on our project was creating an orientation video, which they used in the U.S. and overseas. And it's a pretty big company, and they had in Japan and Germany and England. And so we would fly around the country that summer, going to different shows where they would have their different equipment, like the big shows that everybody goes to kind of like an NEB, but for that, shot video of that. And then we produced this really cool video, and that, that's what they used. So
I got a lot. So you actually have quite a bit of extensive production skills as well.
Well, I in this day and age, no. And maybe.
I would argue it's so much easier now. Back in the analog days, it was a completely different animal.
It was different. Yeah, those big packs.
Even while you're working for this aerospace company, which must have been an incredibly exciting time because that's when the space shuttle program was in its heyday, you're still on really the media side of a large corporation.
I wanted to make sure that I understood the industry is so big and there's so many different avenues, right? So, and especially now, look what's going on today, you can pivot. And at that time, I just wanted to, it was a really good company and it was a great experience. So, I'm grateful for that. And then when, that ended up, it started out as an internship, and I was then ended up getting paid for the summer when I worked on that. And then, based on that, I still was trying to learn as much as I could. And I ended up getting a job as a PR assistant at the Better Business Bureau, which was really interesting because you saw the business side of things. And, they had a magazine there, like a book they put out every year. And
sure,
I worked on that. And while I was doing that at night, I was working for a cable company. We were shooting high school football and basketball games and it was a local origination department. And that was really cool. So it was super community,
And then on top of that, you were an airborne weekend traffic reporter for WGR 55 in Buffalo. So you had 3 jobs basically simultaneously.
Well, I did that. Like my boss was very nice at the Better Business Bureau. She would actually let me do that during the week. And then on the weekends, I worked at WECK, a really great station, and I did weekend news. And I did all of that for a few years. So it was kind of like, you just didn't have a day off for a few years. But again, we were taught, my dad came over from Germany, and he really taught us like the value of hard work and that nothing comes for free and that you have to pay your dues. And there's a deep respect there for work and the work ethic. And so it was never an issue. I was so grateful that anybody, that people would take me on.
Tell me a little bit about being the airborne traffic reporter. Were you in a plane or a helicopter?
My first day in the helicopter, I will never forget it. They needed somebody to fly, and I had applied for this job, and it was just like kind of part-time fill-in, and it was a snowstorm. And I was expecting at the time, I'll never forget it, because I was expecting a helicopter that was the equivalent of, the show Airwolf,
Right.
So I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do it, and I really, they were like, well, have you been in, oh yeah, I've been in a helicopter. No, I haven't been. And then I got there and it looked like the MASH helicopter. But I needed the job, and I knew that if I could do it, I could do anything. And, you just do it, right? So I got up there, and the people were so, everybody at GR, it was just such a great station. The people were the professional, another great news organization. And I remember the guy on the ground, he kept checking on me going, Heidi, are you there? And I'm looking out, I can't see anything because it's all white because it's snowing, and the pilot's going, I've never flown in anything like this before. And I'm thinking, oh, great.
How often were you doing traffic reports? Like twice an hour?
It was 2 stations. So you would push this little button every like 10 minutes. One was like an easy listening, and the other one was a news station. And, at that point it was a big blur because I was just trying to not panic. But it was, I remember, I think I made $6 an hour, and, I didn't get I had insurance for my other job, so that was good, but it was a good experience, and then we would, on nice days, we'd fly in a Cessna, which was great. So, that was.
So it was more comfortable being in the plane than the helicopter?
Yes, it was, yeah. After a while, you kind of get in your groove. But it was, what, I'm so glad I did it.
It's so funny. You think of an airborne traffic reporter, and it has so much gravitas. And then you learn that you're in a helicopter that looked like one from MASH, and you were making $6 an hour.
And I didn't tell my mother.
Oh, would she have been scared something would have happened?
I think she would have just shook her head,
Yeah.
I don't think I remember I got out, my knees were shaking, and I'm like, okay, everyone, thanks so much. I really appreciate this. See you again.
Isn't it amazing? And you look back at that time, and here you're doing 3 gigs. I mean, nonstop.
Yeah.
Even finding time to sleep, I'm sure, was difficult to do, but somehow you managed to get through it, which just always blows my mind at how capable we are if you really push yourself to the limits. I'm not saying it's healthy, but it's amazing what we can do.
I agree with you. And you know what? It's just drive. It's just really wanting something and not being afraid to work. And, somebody calls you, it's 2 a.m, they go, we need this done. This is important. Or you got to do an all-nighter because you're working on a project.
Yeah.
You do it.
Yeah, no, I completely get it.
You want to deliver.
Now, you obviously wanted to be in media, in radio in particular, but did you know what it was that you wanted at that time? Did you know that you were going to go down the path or wanted to eventually see yourself in the C-suite?
I never thought, if somebody told me then that I would have the privilege of doing what I do now, I wouldn't have believed them. At the time, I wanted to be on the air in some capacity, but I also I'm organized, and I really like putting puzzles together and things, and the management side. And, I wanted to do something where I could actually create something and do something. And I'm not if it's the same exact thing every single day, I get bored. So I need a challenge. I'm just wired. That's just the way I'm wired. And in my job now, every day is different, and it's challenging, and, it's great. It's just great.
Your career is very impressive, and I thank you for taking the time to walk us through it, because I find it fascinating on really the roadmap of how highly successful people, how they started and where they got to where they are today. So from now working these 3 jobs simultaneously, you get a gig at WHTT Buffalo, and Bill Weston hires you.
Bill Weston hired me, and it was such a trip, because having listened to Bill when he was on the air at 97 Rock early in his career, to have him say, we have this opening, why don't you send me your tape? And I thought, gosh, I'm not that, my news abilities were, I did it. I was I was working at WAC. And, it was completely different. And Danny was such a legend. And
Danny Neaverth, so everyone knows who we're talking about. And you actually grew up listening to Danny, correct?
I did. Yeah, I did. On a show one time. And then I was so nervous, I hung up. The phone.
Wait, so you called into a show as a bit to win something, or?
Yeah. And then I got through. I didn't expect to get through. I was like, oh, dear. He doesn't even know I did that.
That's hilarious.
Here is music with Dan Neaverth. Neaverth on KB Radio. Neaverth stops in Buffalo. After school or driving home on Radio 152. Oh, it's the Dan Neaverth Show.
What was it like the first time now you're on the air as the news/sidekick for Danny?
It was intimidating, but he was really nice. And like he would do all his little voices that he would do. Artie, he had this voice this character voice he would do. And I would be sitting there and he would suddenly go into this thing and this voice would come out. It was like, oh my God.
Did you not quite know how to react?
No. He was such a pro. And like going out on a remote with him, I mean, people would just like, he's a rock star in his own right, and he just understood it, like watching him. And you look at guys like Joey Reynolds and Sandy Beach, another amazing talent in Buffalo. Sandy was, in fact, Sandy was on the air at HTT before Danny left KB to go there. And I think Sandy was leaving to go, to another gig just to be in their company,
When you landed, do you remember the emotions you had when you landed that gig?
I remember I was sitting, I got the call and, I was just stunned and I went outside and nobody was around. And I was like, what am I going to tell? So I remember I got on my computer and I wrote like 3 notices for all my jobs.
Oh yeah, you had to quit 3 gigs.
And then Bill said, well, we got to shoot this TV spot. I'd never done a TV spot.
So they put you in a TV spot right from the get-go. So this was a huge deal.
Yeah. And Dan's son, Dan Jr., was doing sports, and he's just wonderful. He's not in radio anymore, but he's doing a lot in Erie County. Like he has a big job at Erie County that he's just a solid, decent human being as well. I mean, just great people, really. It was just such a privilege. And then I got to work with guys like Jim Pastrick, another amazing guy who's like one of the best production guys in the country.
Yeah, I'm sure you learned a lot that whole experience working with such pros. And you realize, I guess probably the best example is if I'm a golfer and I'm a horrible golfer, but when you hit a good shot every now and then, you start having this inflated view of yourself and you're like, oh wait, I can do that. I got a birdie. I'm great all of a sudden. And then you actually play with someone who's a pro.
You realize
so completely out of my league. And I remember that when I got hired to work with Rick Dees and just what a huge...
Oh, that'd be amazing. I can't even imagine.
So I imagine Danny was kind of a similar situation where you just all of a sudden you have to act as if, and you learn so quickly from an experience like that.
You totally do.
So from there, you transition over to WGRF Buffalo, and this is your first time doing promotions, correct?
It was. And, the opportunity, a good friend of mine, Mike, called me and he said, hey, he had the gig and, he said, this opportunity is coming up and, you should really consider it. And, at that time, there's that moment where you pivot, right? So, I thought, oh my God, 97 Rock, that's like, I grew up listening to rock. I have 4 younger brothers. That's what, Journey and,
right.
Van Halen, Kiss.
Yeah.
I grew up listening to all of it. So, yeah. And it was the station. I mean, that was that station, listening to Paul Hyne, listening to Bill. And then when the opportunity came up, I just couldn't pass that up. And I went and I met with the GM at the time, Charlie Banda, and, thanks to Charlie and John Hager, who's still there running it, just an incredible program director and great person. Within that week, I had the job and it was life-changing for me. I had so much fun working at 97 Rock in Buffalo. I can't even begin to tell you. They were great people.
Transitioning from on the air to off the air, was that difficult for you?
No, not at all. Because, I still did, like every now and then I'd cover things or I would, like the Dead Show, if we were like doing something, I'd do, if we did a traffic thing, I would do something. Like fly over the stadium or something, but, and then I would also do some on-air stuff sometimes. So it really wasn't, and I really enjoyed like learning about, like, the more I got into it, I really wanted to make a career, from that perspective. I really liked doing the promotions and marketing, but like for real, I didn't want it just because it became available. I wanted it because I wanted to do it and learn and really be good at it.
It's funny. I'm very wired the same as you, and I've always been into the promotional aspect, and I like the showmanship, especially with radio. I think we do a phenomenal job now, but you look back at the era of like the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s and the promotions that we would do, they became bigger than life.
They were.
So exciting to me.
Yeah, we had our own tour, but we had a bus.
Yeah.
we'd do concerts in Buffalo. We would promote concerts in Buffalo. And then we also would go up to Toronto because we're right by the border. So we would go up for, the Rolling Stones or Elton John or, whoever.
Yeah.
We would take a group, we'd take a bus of listeners up there. We'd cover things. It was just so incredible. It really was. And the talent, Carl Russo, who does afternoons, is still there. And he is just great. Larry Norton, who retired not too long ago, but was doing mornings. Just the talent, Anita West. You go on and on. They're still there and they're still rocking. They're great.
That's fantastic. So out of the different formats, I know you're a big music fan. Would you say rock is your favorite format?
Yeah. Now, classic rock.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. No question in my mind.
So then going to RIF in Detroit made a lot of sense.
I left Buffalo. I worked in Cleveland. I went on to, eventually Detroit and then landed at Riff. And Riff was just amazing. Riff's legendary.
Absolutely.
The things that we did there, it was just, working with the talent there and the passion. And that's when I worked for Greater Media for 20 years. And it was a really great experience.
We're very fortunate to have the start of your career and a lot of your career in your hometown.
I was really fortunate. And I did freelance TV as well for the ABC affiliate. I did, I'd cover certain things. Like I go up to Toronto and interview Peter Frampton if he was doing something there. And, we had a great relationship with Joey from Q107 at the time. So sometimes when things would come up, I would go and interview different people and then do stories and, like an entertainment reporter, and then covered when the Bills went the last time I went actually to cover the Super Bowl. I was as a TV reporter covering the entertainment part of it, which was really fun, and interviewing the Charlie Daniels and all, just great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you really kind of crossed over mediums a few different times.
Yeah, I did, and I was still doing radio though the whole time. That was always my main. That was great. I really enjoyed it.
What was the feeling like when you did eventually leave Buffalo? Was that difficult for you with your family so close? Yeah.
Yeah, it took me a while. It was, and then I moved to Cleveland and I worked at MMS, and, I worked with some incredible people, when you talk about programmers like John Gorman and, just the team there, it was just in the history there. And then, ended up moving on and ending up in Detroit where, again, legendary. Riff's going to be celebrating its 50th anniversary this year.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
The talent that went through the halls there is, who's who. It's unbelievable.
Incredible. It is the who's who. You got the Jacobs, you've got everybody. And I can remember, just the promotions that we would do, if Arthur Penhallow, who was incredible, legend in Detroit, if he was on vacation, you never knew, David Lee Roth was coming through to do the show that week, while Arthur was away, or Gene and Paul from Kiss, or, to see the Kiss concert at, Tiger Stadium. And, they would be rehearsing in Detroit at Cobo for a week. And, Detroit's such a great rock town.
Oh my God. Yeah. I think it epitomizes rock music. I'm not sure if there's Cleveland's another obviously great rock town, but yeah. Detroit's fantastic.
No question.
So from your promotions experience, and you'd been doing promotions at MMS, at Riff, at GRF, so at some big heritage legendary radio stations, what is the one promotion you're most proud of?
I would say I loved doing the Bills Welcome Home Rally. The first one, when the Bills went to the first Super Bowl, I literally worked on, we pulled everybody together and said, let's do a rally. And we did for the city. And then the ball drops that they do every year, I was heavily involved with those for 4 years, where 50,000 people come down to the square and we shoot off a bunch of fireworks off this gorgeous building.
Oh my gosh, how cool.
Yeah, it really was cool. But, the working on different concerts that we would do in Detroit, there's so many. I don't, I couldn't even, that sounds weird, but I really have to think about it.
So being a rock music aficionado, was there I'm sure you got to participate in all sorts of meet and greets. Was there some talent that you got to meet that you were just completely starstruck by?
Meeting the Stones was cool. That was really cool. I remember at the time they were rehearsing in Cleveland for a week, and a friend of mine's friend was the PR person for, she was doing their PR. So we actually got to go to some of the rehearsals, and
oh man,
that was cool. That was really special. And in Detroit, we met quite a few people. So gosh, I'm embarrassed. I think about it. I think meeting Robert Plant was cool in Buffalo. He's just, I think he's great. I have to say most of them were I can't think of anybody that was rude or disrespectful or uncool. Everybody's really nice. And, they're always, you got to feel for that because they do that every night and they're like, oh God, we're going again. But they were always really great.
It is the best when you get to meet someone that you look up to so much and they actually are just wonderful human beings at the same time.
Yeah.
I remember getting to meet Carlos Santana, and he was so kind and so sweet. We were taking pictures. I took my father with me to the Hollywood Bowl, and so we were doing shots, and there was a couple in front of us doing a picture. I was taking the picture for them, and it was before phones. You were taking pictures really through your phone, so it was an actual camera, and the batteries actually fell out of this camera and hit the floor.
No.
Yeah, and I won't ever forget Carlos Santana literally getting down on his hands and knees looking for the batteries.
Really?
And helping find the batteries. Yeah, that's to me just such a nice, sweet guy to do that. And we found him, took the pictures. But what other stories do you have?
One, thinking about it, was when I was still in Buffalo. We went to John McGhan would host these very cool, experiences before the Grammys. And it was, I think, at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. And Don Henley was one of the people that, it was when he had his huge solo, record. And he was, he came through and we interviewed him. And, I was just such a huge Don Henley fan. So we finished the interview and we're getting ready to leave. And, we go down, he was super nice. Hey, take care. So we're driving down. I'm with Larry Norton and Marc Stout. And we're driving down Hollywood Boulevard. And I'm like, oh my God, we got to go to the Sunset Grill. Right. It's better. Right. So they're like, okay. And they're really good guys. So we pull up at the Sunset Grill and there's one person sitting there and it's Don Henley.
No, are you serious?
But, yeah, no, I'm totally serious. So we get out. At that point, I'm ready to leap out of the car. So we pull up and, I'm like, I'm trying to take a picture, but I can't really speak. So I'm like, hey, Don, would you mind if we get a picture? So the guys are there and I go to take the picture and I was so nervous. It actually shook. They came out in 3D. Crazy. The photo. We finally get the photo and it's a 3D because I'm shaking. I get them back from Kodak. I'm like, ah.
And that's before you've got the digital screen to even see the photo turned out well. Oh my gosh.
Exactly. Yeah, there was no love at that point. It was just the box.
What was he like in person? Because I've heard he's kind of hit or miss.
He was wonderful.
He was.
He couldn't have been nicer. Oh. Very, very nice. He was wonderful to interview and he was absolutely cool. That was a moment he could have been please bug off and leave me alone. And he didn't. He couldn't have been nicer.
So you're working at Greater Media at this point. When does Peter Smythe, when do you get his attention?
I spent, I think, about 5 years working. I was working with Doug Podell, who outstanding PD and was running Riff and, just learned a ton from Doug. And at that point, I made the pivot because I wanted to learn more about the sales side of things too. So, and we were starting, that's when NTR was kind of starting up and all the different, it was kind of the thing at the time. So Tom Bender, our market manager, asked me if I would help start up a new business development department for a Motown station that we were putting on the air, which was really cool to be in Detroit and to be working at a Motown station.
Right.
The Groove. It was yeah, I'm in. This is great. And so I worked on that. And then I still was doing the group marketing for the cluster because we had 3 stations there. And, one thing led to another. And, I just kept moving up. And then Peter, one day I just got an email from Tom Bender saying that Peter wanted to talk to me. I remember I thought, oh God, am I getting fired?
Wow.
Are you kidding me? Are you serious? I thought he was messing with me. And he's like, no, he's coming in. I'm like, okay.
Was he based in Boston at that time?
Yeah.
Okay. So he was coming to Detroit and wanted to see you. So you're like, oh my God.
Anyway, so I went and I met with him and I had met Peter before and he was great. And, when he would come to visit the stations and then, when we were talking, he said, I'd really like to, do more with Greater Media and the company. And this is what I'm looking for. And And I said, sure, yeah, I can do that. And I went back to my office. I'm like, God, can I do that? You shut the door and you're like, yeah, I can do that.
The answer's like, yes, I can.
Yes, I can. And then I shut the door and I'm like, can I? And then, but it really worked out. And within a year, he made me like director of corporate communication. And I was still doing all my other stuff in Detroit too.
That's insane. How many stations did the Bordas family have at that point?
21.
Jeez.
Philly, Detroit, Boston, New Jersey. So I started helping him with that. And then one thing led to another. And eventually I just moved into that position full time. And then.
So now did you all of a sudden start spending a lot of time on the road, traveling into these markets?
Yes. And then, And then I ended up moving from, I commuted from back and forth to Detroit I was living in Nashville. And I was commuting back and forth probably for about, 10 years. And in the middle of all this, it was amazing. And then, got promoted and just really focused on, what we were doing as a company and promoting greater media. And Peter, the work we were doing. And Peter was really our Peter's front and center with the company and worked out great. Yeah. And then eventually just moved up.
That's incredible. I mean, at that point, now you're an executive with a, highly respectable company, and to work with someone like him. Did you feel like you made it at that point?
I didn't really think about that. I just, I was just excited. I was doing what I loved.
How did the day-to-day change? It sounds like when you're in Detroit, you're able to focus more probably on what was happening there. And I would imagine see promotions through and be more involved in the day-to-day. And now when you become an executive, you're dealing with the multiple markets, the multiple stations, and you can't be as hands-on as I would imagine you were used to being.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, when I was working with Peter, I was doing new business development for one of our stations, and then the group marketing, but not like every single state. You know what I mean? I just kind of helped Tom with what he was doing.
It's almost like from an advisory role, a marketing director.
Yeah, because we have great marketing directors in each, at those stations. Yeah, I mean, it just got to a point where we were doing so much that I, and then I started working with the other, as far as like in my role in corporate communications, you're working closely to get the word out, to the trades and to this and to that, and then working with the industry. And, I served on the NAB board, and, it was just great. I mean, it really opened up so much.
What an incredible rise to success. And then in 2016, Beasley ends up buying Greater Media.
Right. Yeah.
And a lot of times in those scenarios, a company being acquired a lot of the executives don't stay on, but you actually not only stayed on, but you got hired as the VP of Corporate Communications and then promoted in 2019 to the Chief Communications Officer. Walk me through that a little bit.
Well, the company was, we announced it in July. It closed in November. I was actually out for about 7 months because there was somebody in the position for about 7 months. I was basically, kind of reevaluating, when you're in that situation going, well, what do I want to do? And, I was really fortunate. I had always seen, I saw when I was on the NAB board, I got to see Caroline and get to know her a little bit. I didn't know her well, but I really respected her for her work ethic and everything she was doing. And then one day she sent me a note and, wanted to talk. And then one thing led to another. And I knew some of the stations because I worked with all of those stations, from the acquisition.
Right.
And then, it's been great. I mean,
I have to imagine that being the Beasley family, our legendary family of broadcasters, and the Bordas family, probably similar cultures?
In many ways, yeah. I mean, I think the transition was actually really a lot smoother than in a lot of situations because they're both great families. They both were committed to radio. And I think that, being part of that transition process eventually, and seeing, the great thing is Caroline is really smart about identifying, taking the best traits, of everybody and then pulling those. So things that worked really well in one situation, we embraced, and then another situation we embraced, and it really came together. I mean, it really was, at least from, where I sat, I thought it went really well. And people really were thrilled that, another family, we were going to another family business. And, it's a little different in the sense that we're public, right? We're publicly traded. Greater Media was private. But regardless, Beasley was private at one point too. And I think that, it's the best of all worlds.
From the outside looking in, I would agree. I think there's something very special about family-owned businesses and operator-owned businesses, I should probably say and specify. But you look at how so many of these broadcast companies were started with, the Mazes and the Beasleys and the Dickies. And it's really a lot of legendary families came out of broadcasting, or a lot of legendary families ran these great companies. But I think that there's a certain common sense, an operational common sense to running a station versus sometimes when you focus too much on the financial side. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. So we're celebrating our 60th anniversary this year at Beasley, right? George was a high school principal in Benson, North Carolina, and had a passion for radio, built a radio station from scratch, and worked as a teacher, as a principal for 8 years while running his first radio station. He would go there in the afternoon and on the weekends, really rolled up his shirt sleeves and just got into it. And literally, I'm sure worked every day too. And to see what he did turn into 63 radio stations and in some pretty big markets. Yeah,
amazing markets.
We're involved in esports. We have a significant investment in esports. We own a team in the Overwatch League. Our digital investment, what we're doing in that space. It's really cool. It's really cool. And as a publicly traded company and, to be part of something like that, we're on the NASDAQ, there's a sense of pride.
I have a tremendous amount of respect on how you guys program and operate the radio stations. I think, again, from the outside looking in, we obviously do some work with you, but it's very well, I feel like you are very focused on the product. You're very focused on the community. Ultimately, what's going over the air?
Our people are a big part. We wouldn't be here without our teams.
Yeah. And I think that unfortunately, not a point, but I think a lot of times that gets lost. And I just want to point out how impressed I am by the way that you guys do that and really focus on the listeners and in making a great on-air product.
Well, I think it goes back to, it's about great content, and it's about really truly caring about your community and giving back to it. And I think coming from, we still, if you look at our roots and where this company was built, it's all about community. George built that radio station because he wanted to provide a voice for his community in Benson. And, we believe in that. We walk that talk every day. We didn't forget about that.
About 6 months ago, I was interviewing Ron Stone, who is also an owner-operator, and he was actually very complimentary and worked for George at one point and said that he learned a lot of his management and his leadership skills through George.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, George is a wonderful person. He is so nice, and he's the real deal.
Tell me a little bit about the community and being the co-chairman of the Library of American Broadcasting.
First off, I'm so honored that they would ask me to co-chair. To be co-chairing with Ginny Morris.
By the way, and another legendary family, radio family. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, our board, we have trailblazers on our board. And Ginny's done a great job leading the organization over, I can't even begin to tell you how many years. And, I was asked to co-chair back in July, and it's just been great. I love history, and I'm so proud to be a part of, in any capacity, quite frankly, in radio and broadcasting in general. So to be surrounded by these incredible people, it's just, you talk about that Danny Neaverth moment. I have that every time
And in full disclosure, I was very honored to be asked by you at the end of last year to join the board. So I'm exceptionally excited about it. And I haven't even been on my first, I guess I was on a very tail end of one meeting late last year, but we haven't even had a full board meeting. But thank you for including me. And for those people that don't know, do you mind filling everyone in a little bit on the Library of American Broadcasting?
So the Library of American Broadcasting Foundation is a nonprofit, and it's dedicated to preserving the past, reflecting the present, and informing the future of the American broadcasting industry. So we work in conjunction with the University of Maryland, where the collection is housed, some history to it. It started out where the broadcast pioneers with the NAB, like many years ago, started collecting all this incredible history, audio, video, scripts from television newscasts and like things that you just can't even begin to imagine. And it got to the point, it was housed at the NAB, and it got to the point where they needed more room, and they really needed somebody to curate this amazing collection, right? It reflects what we do. And they established a relationship with the University of Maryland, and it's near. They interviewed schools, and University of Maryland's just terrific. They have a great team, and they house the collection. They curate the collection, and their team. I mean, we work with them regularly. They're just outstanding. I mean, I can't begin to say enough about them. But we have some. We actually have some really cool collections. We've got the Broadcast Pioneers collection. We have the Westinghouse tapes. It's over 2,300 audio tapes of national news feeds and programs delivered to, over radio from 1957 to 1982. We have the History of Women in Media collection. We have a wartime history. We have everything ranging from coverage from, Vietnam, the Nixon, and then the Nixon tapes. We have that. It's pretty significant. And we also have the Howard K. Smith. We have some of his papers. Every time we go to University of Maryland for a meeting, it's like going into a treasure. You're looking for this treasure, and then you pick this up, and then you look at that and you go, oh my God, I remember that. Or, it's so exciting.
It's incredible. It's, I think, very, very important to archive this amazing history. That's all made available, by the way, to students, and not only students at the University of Maryland, but students at pretty much any other college, right? Or any high school that would want to access it. And then documentarians are able to access it for documentaries. And how would someone go about if they wanted to donate some audio to the collection?
Well, anyone that's interested in doing that, I think the best start would be to contact us. And if you go to the Library of American Broadcasting Foundation.org, if you go to our site, check it out, send us a note, and then we can help you start a dialogue with UMD. They're just terrific, and they're open to things, and they really look at what goes into the collection when they make their decisions. They put a lot of thought into it. But we would absolutely, if you want to contact us, and we can start the dialogue to see if it would be the right fit. And if for some reason it wasn't, there might be some other options as well that they could recommend for you. It's just great. I mean, and the other thing too is a lot of movie companies will use the library to do research, when they're doing a movie, to make sure that, that time period that they're looking for, what was going on at that point. It's just great. But, the other thing that we do the big Giants, the Giants event, Giants of Broadcasting. We honor trailblazers every year. It takes place in New York in the fall. We do it in conjunction with IRTS and the International Radio and Television Society. And it's a beautiful event. We've honored people like Tom Brokaw, Lester Holt, and we have a whole list on our website of all the amazing people that we've honored. We do that. We also fund, as the school continues to transfer things to digital, the money we raise as a foundation is used to support that and take care of that. So that's what we do, what the foundation does. We help, we're almost a philanthropic arm, so to speak.
Which I think is so important, because so many of these tapes that are sitting around, they go bad and it's forever lost.
Right. I mean, at some point things start to deteriorate, right? So, it's really important to make sure that it's digitized and saved, because that's our history. I mean, that's right at the end of the day.
Including your airborne traffic reports.
Oh, God. I remember sitting on a milk crate, and the thing, and I'm thinking with a pillow on it, and it looked like a seatbelt from a car, and I'm thinking,
Wait a second. You were sitting on a milk crate in a helicopter.
I don't know. I wasn't very comfortable, and I thought,
I don't know if that would be up to code.
Alone, as I was making $6 an hour. I think I'm never going to pay this off.
Let's talk a little bit about the future. And you had mentioned this, but about being in esports, which is incredibly cool. And we actually have an esports arena close to us. We're in Glendale, but over in Burbank, there is one. And then when people could actually go and do things in person, it was wildly successful, and thousands of people would go and actually watch. So how did that come about? Do you mind filling us in a little bit about it?
Sure. Caroline, she's super strategic, and she's innovation's a big part of what we do and who we are. And we were looking at how could we reach future generations, right, that aren't necessarily listening to the radio? How are we going to reach those, the teens and beyond, right? And one of the areas, as we started looking at it and doing more research, esports kept coming up. Esports. So we started out by buying a show called Checkpoint XP, which is terrific. It's a syndicated show. It covers esports and the esports lifestyle, right? So everything from Comic-Con to big tournaments. It's great, and it's based out of Detroit. We actually have an esports studio,
which is beautiful. I got Justin Chase, who I'm a huge fan of.
Great.
Your chief content officer gave me a tour about a year ago, and just a beautiful facility.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, and we have some great casters. And, it's actually a really great, when we talk about casters, as our industry, especially with radio and television, continues to evolve, a lot of students are interested in pursuing careers in esports. Like you can get college scholarships. There are most schools now, colleges have either esports clubs or esports program. They actually have curriculums for it. So whether it's management or on air or what have you. But so we started out doing that. And then from there, we invested in Team Renegades out of Detroit. It's an esports organization that's involved in several different types of esports competitions and things like that.
I got introduced to it about a year and a half ago. We hired Kristin Lawrence, who's actually, I'm sure you know, Bob Lawrence's daughter, and she was all about Twitch and into gaming.
It's where they live,
And I could not fathom at the time how big, but at least at this point, it may have changed, but Twitch was, I want to say, like the 15th most visited website in the world.
Just plays a big role. Our guys are all on Twitch. In fact, some of our radio guys are on Twitch too.
And she had explained it to me that like this esports arena over in Burbank, fans of esports go to these settings, much like we would go to a baseball game or a football game, to go watch in person. And they just happen to be a fan of the Beasley Overwatch team or the Dodgers.
We own the Houston Outlaws.
The Houston Outlaws.
We produced one of the events you're talking about in Houston at the Revention Center. And it's like a massive rock concert meets like a massive sporting event with a massive movie theater. You know what I mean? It's just this incredible, I don't want to, while it's not the same as a U2 concert, obviously it's got that vibe, and it's big, and it's not like a small radio remote. We're talking about a massive undertaking, and there's an energy to it that is just incredible. And we had people lined up around the building. It was a 2-day weekend event. Lori Burgess is our chief operating officer for Beasley Esports. She's done a phenomenal job. And, producing this event was, bringing the technology that's involved with it and just the passion. The fans the Houston Outlaws fans are amazing. They're so supportive of the team. And they're rock stars.
That's so incredible. That's really exciting. And hopefully by the summer or fall, those will start to happen again to some degree. And I'd love to go to one, but I just want to applaud you for getting into that space, because I find it, as little as I know about it, I know it's a very exciting and a robust space that's growing in leaps and bounds. And so,
yeah, it's cool. Caroline did the right thing. She saw it early on, and she did it.
Merging it with the radio and creating a radio show around it. That's neat. What do you think in regards, I think you guys are doing the gaming, which is amazing. I know Town Square's got their Ignite platform, which is in the digital space. A lot of companies are going into podcasting. What is your like prediction for kind of the future as radio evolves and starts to get into these different spaces?
Well, I think radio is still the foundation of our house. However, having said that, digital is such a massive part of it. Todd Handy, who's our chief, digital officer, came on board, about a year ago, and he's really doing a phenomenal job. We're doing a lot in that space. I think, that coupled with other technology, such as Q, which is really cool. It makes radio look as good as it sounds in the car. So you're driving, you're in your car and say, I'll just use Geico as an example. Your spot comes on, that image comes on, and then you have already, you have a message immediately coming on with that. So it's like this interactive, cool thing. You've seen it with obviously album art, but we're heavily involved in this technology, and we love it. And like during COVID, we were sending out, which obviously COVID's still taking place, but, the initial messages where we were really trying to get people, social distance, wear a mask. All of this is coming up on the visual of your screen.
That's incredible.
Yeah. No, it's really.
So if there's a Geico commercial on the air, will there be Geico video running simultaneously then?
There'll be a Geico image that will pop up. Yeah. So it's really, the Q technology I'm really excited about, because that's just another touch point. You're hearing it and then you're seeing it, right? And research has shown that people remember it when they see it too.
It's a double impression, basically.
Yeah, it is. It's really, really cool. And we use it as a company, all the time. That's another thing that we can provide our clients with, but also our community. If there's something that's going on that's important and we need to get the word out, we can do that. When people are in their cars, it's a great way to do it.
Last thing I'll leave you with, Heidi. What would you advise a student, obviously being the co-chair of the Library of American Broadcasting? You obviously are involved with students, and it's something that's dear to your heart because you started and literally giving the announcements, the school announcements in the morning to everyone sitting in homeroom. What would you counsel someone looking to get into the industry on how to start their career today?
I think they need to figure out, nobody really knows. We all think we know what we want to do when we grow up. I knew I wanted to get into radio. I just wasn't sure what direction, where I started and where I ended, or I hope it's not ended, but now. But I think it's start exploring, do as much as you can, volunteer, ask questions. Like if you see something cool and how did they do that? Don't be afraid to ask. And I've worked with students over the years, I still do, that will call me and say, well, what do you think about this? And, we're involved in esports, depending on where their passion is, right? It's all about passion at the end of the day. You can't teach passion. You can teach somebody mechanical stuff, but you can't teach what's inside. And I think that it's what makes you tick. And, you get to a place where, I've never really thought about, it's like, you look at, and I will say this, that, the money was, when I was growing up, I didn't even think about that. It's like, I want to get into radio.
Right.
It wasn't until, and eventually, everything followed. The universe works in a way that if you love what you're doing and you're good at it, and sometimes you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You just have to work hard to figure it out. I'm not smart. I'm not afraid to work.
You and I think almost exactly the same. I feel the same way. I just, got up every day because I loved it and did it. And, the rest eventually does follow. And Ray Dalio, to your point, says hire for attitude above anything else.
Absolutely. You can't teach passion. Passion is everything.
Heidi, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
I'm so honored that you would even invite me to be on this. I'm such a fan of yours.
Now, I'm really looking forward to spending some time with you on the board of the Library of American Broadcasting Foundation, and obviously,
we're grateful that you have, you've accepted the invitation and that you're on it.
Beasley cares, and everything you do for the community your communities, I should say, is amazing.
Our people do it.
I think is fantastic, and it does not go unnoticed. All the good that you do and Beasley does for listeners all around the country. And I wish continued success and health to everyone as we endure, hopefully, the back part of this pandemic now.
Absolutely. We will get through this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.